Good afternoon. My name is Tony Arguello. I'm doing a presentation on gentrification for Business 501 for the spring 2018 semester. Let's get into it. Gentrification is defined as the renovation of homes in a geographic area that appeal to middle-class tastes. Some of the mechanisms of gentrification are that wealthier people move to a neighborhood because they can afford to first buy and then remodel the properties. Something they do is they reduce blight and they improve public works by petitioning local governments to improve these works. They're considered urban pioneers because they're the people who are going into these areas when others shy away for various reasons. There's a new development of luxury housing, one of the key indicators of gentrification. Arrival of high-end shopping and dining. Think Starbucks or juice bars with expensive $10 or $12 juices. Revival of interest in urban living is one of the key drivers of gentrification. People with resources, they often work in the city and they want to live there, so they're starting to gentrify some of these areas. Neighborhoods, they get renamed. An example is Low-High. Previously, this neighborhood in Denver was called Highlands. Then it became Lower Highlands. Now it's the trendy Low-High. It was mostly Latino and working class, but now it's 75% approximately white and affluent residents. Price per square foot went up from $125 per square foot in 2000 to $338 on average in 2017. Rhino, River North Arts District. Similar way to Low-High, this was mostly bohemian artists living in these dilapidated structures, but now it caters to the wealthier crowd with fancy art galleries, pubs, and innovative shopping experiences. Some of the key players. Pardon me. What does gentrification do? It lets people who are affluent build the community they want. They can have renovated homes, fun shopping and dining, and restored public areas, partly due to their efforts in petitioning local governments. One effect is that it displaces lower socioeconomic status residents and it breaks apart communities. Demands are placed on the government to improve public works. Some people call for rent controls and stricter building permits to limit or curtail developments and renovations in areas. There is a protection for historical properties. We saw a lot of this in Denver, where there were historical areas being torn down and developers were building parking lots or just modern structures there. So now there's a lot of protection placed on these by local governments due to the demands of so many people. Basically, gentrification changes a neighborhood from what it was into a renovated area that attracts affluent residents. There's better expensive shopping. Better is subjective, of course. Expensive being the key word here. Property values and rents increase. People are displaced. What we can see here is how free market forces affect people with money and those who don't have as much. The key players of gentrification. People with higher socioeconomic status. These people, as stated previously, they can afford to remodel properties. Who are these people? They are generally speaking white, young, and affluent. They buy fixer-upper houses and they renovate them. They sometimes sell these. This could be a flip situation. After renovating, the house goes up in value and it's sold for a higher price to an affluent family or investor or whoever this might be. It's a person with a higher socioeconomic status than the average in the area. Rent prices go up. This attracts affluent tenants and pushes out people who cannot afford to pay these higher rents. Some benefits of gentrification is that properties have better aesthetics because they are renovated. Neighborhoods can become safer and more structurally sound. This is speaking about the structures primarily. Public works are improved, and the city does get more tax revenue because of increased rents and higher property values. The low socioeconomic status people, they usually are the losers on this end of things. They're displaced. They must move to areas that they can afford. Sometimes people become homeless. They might be sick, might be elderly, maybe mentally unstable. Maybe they don't have the resources to relocate to another area. Communities are broken. There's a disruption because not everyone can afford to live and stay together in the area. Expensive retail replaces economical shopping, and people can't afford to shop there, they won't. As said previously, these people generally are the losers. They don't see a lot of benefit from gentrification because they cannot participate in the community because they really can't afford it. They feel powerless and pushed around. Who are these low SES people? Well, they're renters, homeowners, business owners, and usually they are the racial minority, which would indicate not white. They can't afford to pay increasing rents. Sometimes homeowners are offered cash for their home, so they sell, and they still can't afford to remain in the area. If you've ever seen those signs, those big billboards that say, "We buy ugly houses," that's one sign that a neighborhood is gentrifying. Those are usually investors, a group of investors buying these homes and doing flip situations. Leases increase and businesses can't afford them, so boutiques end up replacing them because the commercial rents are higher and the owners of commercial property, they seek to get as much revenue as possible. So there's a natural evolution from the old businesses into the new ones that can pay higher lease prices. Third parties, we have local government, community development corporations, and real estate developers. With regard to local government, some of this has been discussed. Rent controls are an issue. There are mandates that are being placed on developers to build a percentage of low-income housing into new developments. Public improvements are made to public works. These community development corporations, these are important. They help people with lower socioeconomic status. They offer housing assistance programs, general financial support for qualified residents. What they try to do is to prevent the displacement of residents. They try to actually strengthen the community by helping people stay there that might not be able to otherwise. Developers, they are the major drivers of change. These are people with money. They're people who have the resources to actually make developments. They are being constrained somewhat by governments. As mentioned previously, there's a low-income component to new developments to encourage a community that is not just made up of high-income people, but people from different levels of the socioeconomic strata. A case study, Denver. This is an area that is gentrifying very, very quickly. Telltale signs are present, the good signs and the bad signs. We have the trendy new names like Lohi and Rhino. Expensive shopping and dining, they are in full swing in the city. Sharply increased rents and property values, yes, this is the case. People are being displaced. Mostly white, previously was Latino. We can see this case study in the 5 Points neighborhood. It was mostly Latino and African American, but now it is mostly white. It was known as a very dangerous neighborhood by many markers, crime being one of them. Now it's considered one of the most desirable neighborhoods. It was named that way by 5280 magazine several years ago. There's a reduction in blight through the renovation of the facade of buildings. Public works are improved. Now, there's some fights in city council. Developers, they were unchecked for a time. They would tear down historic buildings and develop luxury housing or parking lots, but the community, they fought against it. They rallied. The neighborhood that was being destroyed is not being destroyed in the way that it was. The Historical Society actually put some laws in place where a developer, if they come in, they can't just tear down a historical building, but what they can do is they can renovate it as long as it has a change that is minimal to what it looked like previously. It basically has to mirror the theme of the neighborhood, the type of architecture that's already there. Mixed-use developments and low-income housing. So this is something that's happening in areas that were vacant. Stapleton Airport, this was the major airport before Denver International was built. What ended up happening when the airport left, the Stapleton Airport, is that there were a lot of abandoned structures and wide open space. So developers came in and they built these mixed-use communities where there was retail, office space, and residential areas. And a percentage of that, of course, was low income as mandated by the government. Gates Rubber Factory, it's a planned mixed-use development. 5 Points, it's a large neighborhood, but there's a lot of mixed-use development happening in that area. An issue that's happening in Denver is related to homelessness, SRO, single-room occupancy buildings. These are basically studio apartments that people on a fixed income live in, so they don't have to be on the streets. Well, in 2007, the University of Colorado, they wanted to offer student housing, so they purchased several of these SRO buildings and they demolished them. This displaced approximately 1,000 people, and it's estimated that 80% of these people became homeless. It was a huge influx. The shelters couldn't handle them. It was unfortunately getting into the winter months, and a number of these people were dying. Not a good thing. Ink Coffee Shop. They posted a sign in 2014 that said happily gentrifying since 2014. They faced major backlash from the community and from politicians. The store was vandalized and boycotted fervently. The store actually ended up closing down. The message from the community was clear. If you want to say you're gentrifying and you're representing something that is taking away from the people who have deep roots in the community won't stand for it. All right, let's get into some ethical questions. The key ethical issues with gentrification is that it displaces people, the cultural identity of neighborhood changes, homelessness increases, communities are divided, and these things are upsetting a lot of people. So with regard to displacement, there's a lot of stress caused on the family. There's a lost connection to their roots. If people do get evicted because they can't afford the rents, it damages their credit report and inhibits their ability to rent in the future. Questions are, where do these people go? Can they even afford to move? The cultural identity, the character of a neighborhood. We saw this in the Five Points neighborhood in Denver. It was an area that had a lot of Latino and African Americans. There was a strong, thriving jazz culture there for many years. Well, something that happened is people, kind of the starving artist image. These people couldn't afford to live there because of the increasing prices of property, and the dining and shopping options were also becoming much more expensive. So this neighborhood is mostly white, affluent people who are working in the city, and the jazz culture is actually suffering in a major way. It's more of a consumable commodity to the people who have the wealth. It's not really the way that it was in the past, where people were thriving there and creating in an inspired way. The increase in homelessness, this becomes, of course, a major challenge. Where do people go? And if they're homeless, that presents a whole host of other issues. When communities get divided, this was something that was observed with the Ink Coffee Shop. It was an us versus them mentality. People of low socioeconomic status, they usually feel animosity toward the affluent newcomers, and they actually turned out in large numbers, and they made their disdain known. These people, when they feel disenfranchised or angry, sometimes they have an avenue to fight against it, but generally speaking, they don't. Okay, these are just some general questions, basically targeted at somebody who is considering coming into an area and driving gentrification. It's a question of, if you have the resources and you have the drive, should you go into an area? Should you start buying property? Should you increase your rents if you own something? Should you flip properties? Should you increase your the rate of your commercial leases to cater toward boutiques? Should you open these innovative and expensive bars or restaurants? Should you renovate your home to make it look nicer? If you're a developer, should you develop luxury housing in a particular area? All these are good questions. People who are in the community being displaced probably would say no. People who are coming in and wanting to drive change and progress would probably say yes. Well, community activists are trying to find ways to bridge the gap between these two people and saying, okay, if you want to come in with the resources and you want to do some things that would be considered gentrification efforts, perhaps you can create value for the community as a whole, not just cater to the high socioeconomic status people, but try to find a way to include everybody in the community, so that it's a place that people don't get kicked out of, that they can still enjoy and participate in. So some of the moves toward that are mandates on developers with creating a percentage of mixed-use developments as low-income housing, so that there are people with million-dollar homes and people that are living in homes that maybe are 150 or 200,000, depending on the area. But the point is, it's lower income and higher income people living together in a community setting. So the prime ethical issues I basically covered. I hope by listening to this presentation, you had an opportunity to learn some things about gentrification, what it's doing, how we can identify it, some of the issues surrounding it, and that as you look around your neighborhoods, you can consider some of what's happening and you can decide if you want to be part of the conversation. Thanks for your attention. I hope you have a fantastic day.